Hey, you guys, so I'm about to show you a clip with Dr. Joseph Volpicelli about whether or not naltrexone blocks all pleasure when someone is using this medication for alcohol use disorder. This is a really common question, and I'm so happy to have Dr. Volpicelli answer it because he is literally the leading expert on naltrexone for alcohol use disorder. He's been researching this medication for decades. He's been a clinician in the field, and he was largely responsible for getting it approved by the FDA for treatment of alcohol use disorder in 1994. So I hope that you find this information helpful.
There's a couple themes here. One theme is that constantly comes up is this idea that if you're taking naltrexone, and especially if you're taking it very regularly, that all your activities are going to be flat and dull. Okay. And we're here about myth busting. And so I know you have some real interesting information about that. And I think about that like in the context of going into a concert or a bar or someplace like that, especially with friends, that when you go into that kind of situation and alcohol's part of it, and now you flattened it out by, taking naltrexone, there's all kinds of other neurotransmitters like oxytocin that are happening there, this enjoyment of just the company of other people, and those things aren't blocked by that, correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
So could you elaborate on that, please?
Yeah, so people will often equate pleasure as increases in dopamine. And I'm not sure it's so simple as that. That as I understand how the brain works, there's numerous interactions between dopamine, endogenous opiates, serotonin, oxytocin. And for me, the brain works and pleasure works more like a symphony orchestra. You have a horn section, you have a violin section, you have various sections. And an enjoyable symphony involves all the instruments and how they interact with each other. And even when they're not firing, I forget, someone said, oh, you write the best notes, and the person said it's not the notes, it's the space between the notes that makes music great. And so sometimes it's not just hearing the horns going all the time. That would get boring, I think. It's that you have the horns, but then you have the strings and you go back and forth. And so for me, I think pleasure is much more complicated than just one neurotransmitter system. But the question of, does naltrexone block reward? It's something that I've been thinking about for a long time, and something that when we did the original experiments, we wanted to study because we were concerned about that possibility. And so when I did the original studies, I had questionnaires that asked people about a variety of pleasurable things to see if it would block it. And I found that it didn't. And compared to people who are on placebo, they did not have any less pleasure in things, except for, what did they have less pleasure in? They had less pleasure for
Really spicy
non-chocolate
foods,
sweets, that blocked that a little bit.
Yeah, I think you told me really super spicy foods.
And I had one patient who loved Indian food, and he liked really hot, spicy foods like that brought tears to his eyes, and he no longer liked that. And so normally your endogenous opiates are not only released, but typically released when you experience pain. That's its basic physiologic mechanism. So that it's not, the endorphins are not a key component of natural rewards. But pain is a very potent stimulus for the release of endogenous opiates. So any pleasure that involves pain, it probably does block a bit. So people who are ultra marathon runners, people who eat hot, spicy foods, that sort of thing, it can block. But the other thing about naltrexone that's important to keep in mind is that it's a competitive antagonist at the opiate receptor. So it doesn't completely block the receptor, but it binds to the receptors so that opiates, when they are released, they have a harder time stimulating the receptor. The net effect is, instead of getting a rapid rise in endorphin activity, it's more of a gradual onset. And when there's a gradual onset, there's a gradual onset of dopamine. And so instead of getting that peak sort of euphoric effect, you get more of a nice, longer acting, pleasurable effect. It is probably the case that things that tend to be more addictive tend to have the effect of a rapid rush in something like dopamine, a quick change over time, which produces a nice sort of firecrackery, wonderful euphoria. But when that goes away, then you're left with sort of a rebound of, life is really boring. I'd like to get that firecrackers going again. As opposed to endorphins, when they're released naturally, give you more of a nice, warm, fireplace kind of comfort effect. So you may get a different kind of reward, but it's probably a reward that's less likely to cause addictive behavior. But overall, people who are on naltrexone, most of the patients that I see who want to be on naltrexone say that life is better now because they don't have the alcohol around, and they're able to engage in more social activities. They're able to enjoy their work more. They feel better physically.
Thank you for watching, guys. As always, if you want private, personalized, daily support for your Sinclair Method journey, definitely check out the program that we have at Thrive. You can access information by clicking the link below or visit thrivealcoholrecovery.com.